I do not know why suffering happens, but what if we treat it as a lesson exquisitely designed to help us learn? That quote comes directly from Robert Falconer, who is an internal family system psychologist. What if the pain that we resist is the very path that leads us home to true self and to deep healing on every level? Pain and suffering often seem senseless to us until we learn to decode its message. So, welcome to our episode today. We are going to talk about reframing suffering so that it can become a tool for growth and deep healing. So, hello, Loretta. Loretta's going to chip in. I'm just going to kick it off because I'm not going to speak too much of my own personal experience in this episode, but I am truly a person who can speak from very deep personal experience of this journey of a lot of suffering, but having transformed through it or still in the process of. So I don't speak as a studied authority, but I speak as a personal authority from my own journey. So I'm quite passionate about this topic. So just to kick it off, welcome to the Missing Link in Your Healing. As you know, this is the place where we try and bring you a perspective, a piece of a puzzle, some tools, some insights that may not have come your way before or that you might hear in a different way on our podcast so that you can play a role in becoming your own healer from the inside out. So the thing is this about suffering. We live in a world that prizes comfort and ease, and it's done that for a very long time. Carolyn May says for a good 100 years, human beings have been living what she calls soft, and she's quite a rough speaker, so she uses the word narcissistic. And I'm not paraphrasing her now, but to validate what she says and many other mystical spiritual teachers or psychologists, that suffering is often seen as a problem in our modern world and for a long time now. It's seen as an interruption of the life that we feel we should be living. We're meant to live. And now this discomfort, this illness, this bankruptcy, whatever it is, has come along, a hectic diagnosis, a relationship loss, a death. We're stuck in an anxiety loop. We feel like our life is meaningless, or maybe, like me at one stage, you just feel like you're going completely mad. And the temptation or the automatic reaction, because of how we've been socialized and conditioned, is to resist this and to see the suffering as an absolutely dreadful thing that needs to get out of the way as soon as possible because it's really interrupting our life. However, what we need to know is that suffering is a natural part of life. It is a natural part of being human. And we are not here to spiritualize it away, to avoid it, to rise above it, and to shift it, but rather, well, we are here to do that, but to do it in a way that we face it, move through it, and shift from it. So really what we want to bring in this episode, as we always do, is perspective. Okay. We want you to see this from a different angle. What if there is intention, intelligence?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Just before you continue, I just want to say the other thing that we think is that it's punishment. So it's an obstacle.
Oh,
We have
yes.
hardship, that it's come in our way, or that it's punishment, or that it's like karma. You messed up, you're broken, there's something wrong with you. This is why this bad thing happened. The truth is, good and bad things happen. They just do. And when we see them as stepping stones rather than obstacles, then we can actually do something with it. So that whole thing about punishment, it being a punishment, really feeds into what we fundamentally believe to be true about ourselves in a negative way. I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, therefore I'm being punished. And that sense of punishment can lead to any of our sympathetic dominant reactions like fight or flight or freeze or fawn. So I just wanted to mention this. It's not just that it gets in our way. It does get in our way, but a very common way that we perceive it when the hectic things happens, an insolvency, a dread disease, a loss of a loved one, whatever the case may be, is that we are being punished.
Yeah, that's a very important perspective. There is a nuance here, though, that I know you would agree with, is that it does require reflection as to how we played a role in this without the punishment, without the self-judgment. So the reason I'm so passionate about what we're bringing today as a starting point to many conversations and deep dives into the subject is when I got cancer, I knew that the only way I could get through this and heal from it was to find out why it was there. What had it come to teach me, the suffering? Because don't let anybody tell you cancer isn't a suffering, even if there's a huge gift in it afterwards. Like, it's transformed my life for the better, but it is hardcore suffering, as is any illness that is that extreme. But I think I know that one thing that really helped me through and out the other side of it, not just to heal from the cancer, but to transform my life, is my deep inner knowing, just a deep inner knowing I must have been born with, that suffering always comes with a gift and with some potential transformation. I don't know how I knew that. And even though people had always told me I'm addicted to suffering and I'm stuck in my story, and there was also truth to that to a large extent, I knew that this cancer had come to show me something and that something needed to change. So in order for that change to take place and the healing and positive transformation, I had to reflect without judgment on how I had got to this point. Because for me, it wasn't food, as we all know, or exercise, but there were other things that started revealing themselves. So, yeah. But I think if we can know right up front that it's not a punishment, it's not an interruption, but maybe it actually has intention, intelligence, and even grace, because it's not always a detour. Yes, sometimes there is a caveat, which we're going to have just now. But what if it's not a detour, but a doorway and an opportunity, and even the path itself? It became the path for me. So in this episode, really all we want to bring at this stage is a reframing of suffering, exploring how your physical illness, your emotional pain can be a powerful teacher. But we are going to talk about not self-punishing or self-judging, and doing this with compassion, because we need to unlock the door to the powerful healing that can come from this, but without the harshness. Yeah. So we need to explore. For me, the thing I've learned only now, 8 years down the line, and I wish I'd known up front, is, can we explore this suffering with less anxiety, and can we bring the right energy to it? I was so good at diving into it, but at some stage it nearly took me out because I didn't know what I knew now. So before we carry on, just a caveat: we are not glorifying suffering or romanticizing pain. Okay. Suffering, just a caveat, I might do a whole episode on this, because suffering can become an unconscious addiction, but it's not a topic for now. And not all suffering is purposeful or required. Sometimes it's just a result of systemic harm, injustice, and a person just needs social support or to change their external conditions. So that's just a caveat. But so if you feel, you need to ask yourself, if you are suffering, does the suffering have the power to awaken and help me grow? And I think any suffering can do that, even if it's just something terrible that's happened to you. Ask yourself, is there a gift in it? And if I am to access that gift, what energy do I need to bring to it? Because truly, like fire, which purifies gold, suffering can burn away the false and leave only the essential, which is the place where real healing and transformation lie. So that's not always easy. But this idea echoes the wisdom not just of myself and Loretta, but of many, many traditions and many mystical spiritual teachers from every single spiritual tradition out there. In Buddhism, suffering is a central theme. In Christianity, it is too, with the Christian mystical point of view. Jesus suffered to transcend. Teresa of Avalon, John of the Cross, Richard Rohr, Rumi, the Sufi mystic. The wound is the place where the light enters, he said. He said we have to be trampled like grapes to make good wine. In trauma therapy, all healing begins with witnessing pain, not denying it or bypassing it. And Robert Augustus Masters, one of my favorite psychologists who talks a lot about spiritual bypassing, said, we need to face the dragons that guard the treasure. And even in mythology, actually, the heroes descend into the underworld not to be punished, but to retrieve something sacred. But the thing is this, to know this is all good and well, to know this, but you actually have to know how to move through it and to transform it from it. That's another story.
I've
So,
forgotten what I
sorry.
wanted to say. I had my hand
I'm
up
so
and now I've
sorry.
forgotten.
Yeah.
No, it's not your fault. What I wanted to just add to that is that we need to just be aware that our reflex action is always going to want to be to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so we talk about, and I mean, we've spoken about it in this previous podcast, and I've seen this so many times in my clients. I'll work with someone for months on end, and we'll always circle back to the very first session, which was uncovering the limiting belief and the strategy and the feelings and feeling your feelings. And it sometimes, to me, it feels like a regression. But what I've realized is that people can only face it they can only face the truth, the reality, to a certain extent. And it's almost like we've got to give them the other side, the positive terminal of the battery, that positive vision, because they need both. But it's almost, what I've noticed and I've had enough clients now in this sort of coaching, my coaching career, being sort of away from being a homeopath and just focusing mostly on being a coach, is that we get to a place where suddenly it's like a plateau. It's like a weight loss plateau. And when we get to the plateau, the way to break through is to go back to the reality. Like, what are you fearful of now? So the cancer patient who's been through the chemo and who's had the surgery and who's now cancer-free and who's been coached all the way through that, when the question is, well, where are you now? What are you frightened of now? And it's like the cancer coming back. And so we circle right back to, how did it get there in the first place? It doesn't mean that. So I think what I'm trying to say is that this journey is not linear. We've said this as well before. It's circular, but it's not necessarily circular. You're not just going around the same circle. It's like we've got to come back now with the new awareness and what we now know back to the starting point. So it's actually an upward moving spiral. And I think somewhere, and if I remember the outline, because Antoinette created the outline most beautifully for me, that we come back to, it looks like you've fallen off the wagon. You might go, I'm cancer-free, I should be fear-free. Well, no, you're human. Of course, it's normal for you to be terrified that the cancer is going to come back. But that is now now that we no longer have the distraction, I'm going to say, of you've currently actively got cancer. Now we can go a little bit deeper into the fear of it coming back. And what is that fear teaching us? And what is that fear giving us an opportunity for? And if you've been my client, I've been banging on every week about, have you been feeling your feelings and feeling your feelings? And I can see the clients do the eye roll, yes, of course we've been feeling our feelings. Well, actually, this is an opportunity for us to go a little bit deeper into how to do that and how to actually sit with that, because it's difficult to do that when you're in extreme fear. So sorry, I've been rambling on a bit, but the point I'm trying to make is you're not going to be good at facing it head on day one. But you have to at least be curious and prepared to put on your courage, put on your breastplate of courage to go, I'm prepared to ask the questions, and I'm prepared to accept that I won't get all the answers and I won't get them all in one go, and that this is a process. But I'm prepared to actually embark on that process. And so instead of having that attitude of and being real about, you know what, actually, I don't want to do this. I just want this to go away. Yes, I get that. But is that possible? Is there anything we can do that's going to make it go away tomorrow? Well, no. Okay. So since it can't go away, we acknowledge that we do want it gone, but we can't get it gone. So what can we do with what we have? The other thing I just want to mention about one of the ways that I found that works well for me with my own health and with my clients' health, because I'll be quite honest with you, it's very stressful being the coach of the person who's desperately ill on many levels. And I'll tell you why. Because first of all, I'm always worried that I'm going to exploit the person, because their desperation will make them do everything. So I'm very, very aware of that, right? And I'm also, I do feel a certain sense of obligation to help this person as best I can. I understand. I'm not the healer. I'm not the one that can help them heal. I'm only the guide, right? However, I'm also human, and I want them all to get better. There's no doubt about that. And so that is stressful. So for me, what I do for myself and for my clients is I remind myself I'm a powerful creator, and so are they. I remind myself to see myself as that, even if I don't know what that looks like, even if I don't know how I'm going to fix this. Okay. But, just accept. Can I accept that I'm a powerful creator? Yes, I can accept that. Do I entirely believe it today? Maybe not so much, but you know what? I'm prepared to try my best. Okay, great. The second thing is that the signs and the symptoms, it doesn't matter what the label is, the signs and the symptoms, I look at it as it's a GPS. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're being punished. It's another way shower. It doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. It just means that maybe there is a different path for you that you haven't been able to see. Maybe there are aspects of yourself that you can't uncover until you get stopped in your tracks. And so if I think about it in my clients and in myself, because, if my clients are regressing, let's just say, or my clients are not getting the results that we want them to get, then I, from my ego point of view, am inclined to go, oh my goodness, I'm not good enough. If I was a good enough coach, then this wouldn't be happening. And when I go, no, hold on a second, instead of making it mean something about me, what is this GPS trying to tell the client and me, or me when I'm sick? What is the GPS telling me? Not like, oh, Loretta, you're so bad. You see, you've eaten all that terrible food and you burnt the candle at 7 ends and you haven't been resting and you haven't been doing enough of whatever. And that's why you're sick. That's like the GPS saying to you, you're such a bloody idiot. You took a wrong turn 100 meters ago. And actually, you shouldn't even be going where you're wanting to be going, because your GPS doesn't do that. It just goes. Recalculating, head north, make a U-turn up ahead. All right. So when you see it as it's a GPS, I think somewhere along one of the tools, I think Antoinette, if I remember correctly, is, see it as something that is outside of you. So it's not that it's not happening to you. Of course it's happening to you, but the GPS is neutral. The GPS is just trying to guide you onto the best route for you. It doesn't mean anything about you. And that circles us right back to, this is not punishment. This is not because you're a bad person. This is part of your life path. And we all have a life path. And I do believe that we all have free will. And so we get to choose many roads, and our lives can go on many trajectories. And this is the GPS trying to say, Loretta, you're on this path and you're heading to, I don't know, wherever. And maybe actually you'd be happier if we went that way. I'm like, well, okay, let's give that a go. So sorry, that was a long
So it actually invites deeper inner work. And when we do deeper inner work, that is when we have the potential to access our true divine nature, our higher self. And this is not something we find in spite of suffering or bypassing it, but through uncovering it and moving through it. However, it is not a quick fix. It's not a one shot. It sorts it out, and I would say it's a spiral. process. And the thing I have found, and I know this is true because I've studied it now, is that it goes to deeper and deeper layers, Loretta. When we invite, I mean, suffering invites us to dive into the shadow side of ourselves, to bring to the fore the unconscious stuff, the limiting beliefs, the attachments, the wounds, our coping mechanisms that we've never known were dysfunctional before. It accelerates our awareness of these patterns, our fear, our resentment, our helplessness, and it pushes us to start looking at and discerning the root causes. And then integrating all of that into a healing process that leads us to, at some stage, if we're lucky, to union with God and God's self and the best life. But to get there, it can be messy, it can be multi-layered, and when there's some very, very deep stuff buried in the unconscious, it cannot all come up at the same time. It would kill us. And that's why I don't advocate people just going off and doing psychedelics unless it's very well facilitated by an expert, because that can unfreeze any trauma and just bring it to the fore. So I think it strips away our illusions. It enables us to see the ego and how it's running our life, our defense mechanisms. But that isn't an easy thing for a human being to do. And so we do a little bit, and I have found you do something and then you think you've got it. The mistake I made was like, oh, I've got this now. I'm so peaceful today. But it's not a linear process. And Richard Rohr says, he talks about nine stages of the soul's development. He said, once we get past like level 3, that's when we've got the awareness. We've done quite a lot of this work with our ego. We meditate. But once you start doing that, that's when the real big stuff starts revealing itself, because now you've got the capacity and more tools to deal with stuff coming up from your unconscious. But he said at that stage, often people regress backwards, back into old habits or patterns, because it all seems like you thought you were getting better, but now you're worse. You think that you've healed the cancer, but now why am I riddled with anxiety? I mean, if you're Antoinette, so it can feel like, so it's to know that that means that there is healing taking place and you're on the right path. As you say, Loretta, you can be on the bathroom floor more than once on this journey. It's not a one step progress. And for me, to be honest, I've gone forwards and then I've gone backwards. But in hindsight, did I go backwards? Was I not maybe just accessing deeper parts of myself that were still there? Um, yeah, so it's very, very valid what you say. And I think that's the benefit of working with somebody who's either been on this journey before you or like you can coach somebody through it to say, look, it's okay. You've over the cancer now. After cancer, I can tell you there comes a lot of other issues and problems to be dealt with. And in fact, the after can sometimes be harder than the during, because the during of enduring is what you do in an illness as well as the inner work. Then when the illness is healed, then you're just left with this deep inner work and some level of knowing that you need to do that, because so I think really this invites us just to ask ourselves some questions with compassion and with kindness. What is this trying to teach me? How can I grow from it? And what needs to change? What do I need to heal this? What truth is trying to emerge through this pain? And what am I clinging to? What am I afraid to feel? So the thing is, it's not a 2-month process even. I mean, I've been on this journey for 8 years now, and I'm getting better and better, but at the same time, it's got harder and harder. But now I don't see it as hard anymore. That's why I really wanted to do this episode. I reframe all of it now by asking myself, why do I see this as so much suffering? What if it's just an opportunity for me to really ride the wave of another feeling, or to look at a core limiting belief that I thought I'd healed, but is clearly still running my show? But the mistake I made, and that's why I love bringing this stuff, is I was so self-judgmental and so self-berating when I saw my stuff come up. So I think just to frame this whole journey in, it's not, please, people, we're going to go now, oh, it's so hard and it's going to take so long, so I don't want to do this. But let me tell you, it's worth it. And there are so many gifts in this reveled up ball of wool. There are so many golden moments in between.
Sorry, I just want to add that thing about, it's so hard, and they say it's so hard and it's going to take so long. I was watching it came up on I was watching a clip that I usually watch in the morning on YouTube, and a TED talk by Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week guy, came on. I never listened to anything he's had to say, and he was talking about Stoics, and he was talking about facing your fear. And he had a very interesting exercise, and one part of that exercise was ask yourself, it was about identifying your fear. And then, like worst case scenario, and what could you do to mitigate it? And, it was the first part of the thing. But the part that I really wanted to mention here was, he said, ask yourself, if I take no action, what will the consequences be in 6 months, 1 year, 3 years? And you might go, yes, well, I mean, you don't know that that's going to happen, and that's subjective. But whatever comes to mind is what you believe to be true for you. So, what I think might happen in 6 months, and what I think might happen in 12 months, and what I think might happen in 3 years is different to what you might think, but it's true for me. And I mean, it's not rocket science, but that is it's just a way of framing it. It made me think, because I'm a take action kind of person, because that's my strategy. Okay. It is one. So I'm like, I can't understand why people wouldn't ask for help immediately, because, we got to fix it. I get that that's my egoic strategy. So you can understand that's why I'm a coach, right? But a lot of people freeze and they don't take action. And this is this is not so that you can hate yourself. This is just a question. What would happen if imagine you discover a lump and you take no action for 6 months. Well, what would happen for 6 months? Well, maybe nothing. Maybe the lump would be contained. It might not be a problem. Well, what would happen if you didn't take any action for 12 months? What happens if you had a lump and you discovered that it was a malignant lump and you didn't do anything in 6 months? Well, there's certain consequences to that. And what would happen in 12 months? And what would happen in 3 years? It might never come true, and it doesn't matter. But if you want some sort of insight into why it would maybe be a good idea for you to take action now or not, that might not be a bad question to ask yourself, again, without any kind of judgment. Another thing that and this is about asking the questions, when what I recommend to my clients and what I do for myself is, what is this which I'm not enjoying, this thing, the suffering, right? And whether it's I have no money or I'm sick, or it doesn't matter what it is, what is it forcing me to be or do or have? So, for example, let's say I have a hectic schedule and I've got 1,000 things planned because, I'm an overworker and I'm too busy because that's one of my strategies, and I get flu. And now I'm man down. I'm like in bed for 3 days, right? So what is it forcing me to be, do, or have? Well, first of all, it's forcing me to be still. It's forcing me to rest. That's what it's forcing me to do. Okay, well, so the first question I ask myself is, so how is this a benefit to me? How is this helping me? Well, it's forcing me to, I've been so exhausted, for example, it's forcing me to rest. But I'm still frustrated because now, my schedule. So, so then the next question about well, if it's forcing me to rest, where in my life have I not been resting? Have I perhaps been going too hard? Oh, yeah, actually, I have been going too hard. And the truth is, that's part of my egoic coping strategy. So what that means to me is, I could have been living more in alignment with my divine nature and therefore having more ease, but I've actually created this hectic schedule of half the stuff that I don't even want to do. So, okay, so what could I do to mitigate this? Well, you know what? I could go through my to-do list and I could just take off the stuff I don't want to do. Be really honest about, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Did I say yes to this? Maybe I said yes to something that I actually now realize is a bad idea. Well, could I actually cancel that thing without it harming anyone else or me? Probably. So off the list. So that is, what is it forcing you to be or do or have? So let's say that you're living with a situation where you've got a family member who's really ill. What's it forcing you to be? Maybe it's forcing you to be more patient. This doesn't mean you're a bad person because you were really impatient, but this is the gift of learning patience so that you can be the loving support of this person that's going through something. And that's really the point that we're trying to make. But sometimes it's very difficult to go, what is the blessing in the situation? Well, actually, I'm not seeing a blessing right now because right now it feels like a curse. So the intermediary step is, what is it forcing you to do, be, or have? Like, what is it giving you that you don't want? What is it forcing you to be that you don't want? Let's say patience. Or what is it forcing you to do? Rest. Okay, so how can this rest, patience, whatever, how can this be viewed as something that is useful to move me forward?
Yeah, so I think if there's only one takeaway you take from this episode is it's about the way you approach this. It will determine whether it heals you or annihilates you. And people are suffering a lot right now in the world, and I truly believe that it's because we've avoided this journey of facing the hard, and we've been really spiritualized, socialized, and even the self-help stuff has led us astray from putting meaning on hardship, and bringing a different energy to it, because that's the thing that's really important. So that's what you've just spoken to. How we choose to respond to it is going to determine whether we remain a victim, or whether we grow from it. Can we give it some meaning? That's what you've just said. It doesn't mean it's always easy, but if we reframe it, it can become a doorway to many things, including purpose, service, spiritual insights. So reframing it is like what you've just said, not why is this happening to me, but what could this be showing me? And also, don't be scared by it. I was quite terrified by some of my mental suffering, to be honest. And now, in hindsight, I can see that maybe I could have brought a different energy to that and have been a little bit excited by it, because it was an opening and an opportunity, and it wasn't there to destroy me. I know that now, but at the time it felt like it was. And I think it's really important, and you've spoken to this in a different way. Please know it's okay to not be okay. And you are not alone in this. Um, it's okay to feel this way. It's okay for everything to not be okay. It's part of the human condition. And we're so unkind to ourselves and and shut ourselves away often from other people when we're deeply suffering. So we're going to bring some very, very, very basic, simple tools in this episode, because you can't dive too deep into all of this stuff. It's too overwhelming. And these are certainly tools that where I started and I still use all the time. So cultivate inner stillness and reflection so that you become deeply self-aware. We say this so often, but we can't emphasize it enough. Compassionate, moment-to-moment self-awareness. And this takes time to cultivate. I know that, but you just need to start, because that's when you start seeing your reactions, your triggers. You start noticing how you're feeling. You start noticing that you're suffering instead of pushing it away with overworking or over exercising or drinking your 3 glasses of wine or whatever it is that you do, because we do tend to avoid, resist, and deny these shadow parts of ourselves. And we seriously have been encouraged and trained and conditioned to do that. So that's why we're bringing this. Open the space, and this might just be a conscious decision in the beginning or an intention. Open the space to fully feel and acknowledge your feelings the hard ones, the ones that feel like real suffering. Robert Falconer, I heard him say recently, one of the reasons the world is in such a mess because there's so much unexpressed and unfelt grief in human beings. We have not been encouraged to feel the hard feelings. So when these hard things come up, we need to let it in and not usher it away. And we have done episodes on feeling our feelings. We need to build emotional regulation tools, and we bring those kind of things to you all the time. So to feel our emotions, but not to be flooded by them or overwhelmed, because that can also create a problem. And then acceptance. Resistance. There's this meme out there that says what you resist will persist. And I can tell you right now, resistance is where the suffering lies. But there's also nuance to this. But if we resist how we really feel or resist how hard it is rather than radically accepting it, it changes everything. I'd say 50% of our suffering from our own reflection is the resistance to it, whether it's the physical illness we're going through or the mental state. When you stop resisting the fact that the pain exists, you are free to respond to it rather than react and fight against it. So, yeah, this is not hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's okay to just say, this is pain, and I'm just acknowledging it.
Can I just make an observation as you were talking? What came to me was we are here to grow, right? And so if you look at a baby, when that baby first tries to roll over on its tummy, does it look like it's having the best time of its life? No, it's not. It's struggling, right? Or when it's trying to learn to walk, it's struggling. And yes, there's a lot of support because the caregivers, we're like, when the baby does turn over, we go, oh, look at what you've done. Or when they take their first steps, right? So there's huge amounts of support, but there's also massive challenge. But the baby who can't roll onto its tummy at the first attempt doesn't go, this is too hard. Why is this happening to me? My karma is so bad. Because this is what growth is about. So Dr. John DeMartini had a quote that said, maximal growth happens at the border of support and challenge. He didn't say maximal growth happens when we're continuously supported. He said it's at the border of support and challenge, right? And so if you think about a baby, babies are encouraged. We encourage them to sit. We do things with them so that they can be strengthened. We praise them when they smile. That's the support. And the challenge is that little child is learning how to gain mastery over a nervous system and a muscular skeletal system that it has zero control over. I mean, a newborn baby can't even pick its nose or rub its eye because it doesn't have the cord to do that and is completely dependent. But if you look at the development of the child, the more skills the child learns through struggle. Babies don't learn to walk because we make it easy for them. They learn to walk because they fall down 100 times. And then
And in fact, we do that in other areas of our life, Loretta. Let's be honest. If we're going to run a marathon, we push through hard. If we want to be a famous weight builder or whatever, we want to get a master's degree, we are going to go through. And yet, with our own personal inner world and state and our emotions, we want to just do a meditation or go to a healer.
But it's
and,
also, I think
and
it's
be
also
okay.
because we've been socialized into this idea that we can have it all.
Yes.
Like, you can have it
No,
all.
I
Yes,
agree. It's
you can
not.
have it all.
It's,
Yeah,
it's
but
not our fault.
I think that having it all is you can live your true divine nature and purpose. But that doesn't mean that everything in the world always goes your way. Let's just get real. This is a dualistic universe that we live in. We live in this dualistic kind of reality where happy and sad and support and challenge, they come together and they're always there. So another way, just before I forget, because I tend to forget these things, another way that I found is quite useful is when you're stuck in your current problem, it's sometimes very difficult to see the wood for the trees. But when you look at a problem in hindsight, it's easier to see what you learned and what the blessings were. So another trick is to ask yourself, where and when were you in a situation where you felt the same? So maybe you didn't have cancer, but maybe you were in a situation where you were terrified. you were going to lose your business, or you had a breakup, like a really bad breakup with a relationship that you were maybe financially dependent on the other person. I don't know, wherever you were, we all know what it feels like to be scared. Now you might say, well, I wasn't this scared. Well, okay, like just scared, like close enough to this, maybe not at the same level of intensity. And how did that turn out? So what did you learn about yourself? How did you grow? And it's not, did that turn out peachy? My first thing is, did you survive that? So I always go, yes, Loretta, I survived that. Okay, great. Okay, so we know we can get through something like this. Yes, okay. Because now, did you do it more than once? Because most of us have more than one memory where we've been in fear, for example, or we've been uncertain, or we failed, right? We have more than one memory. So go to each one of the ones you can remember where you experienced how you feel now, and just ask yourself, in hindsight, what did I learn from that? Who supported me? How did I grow? What did I get out of that, right? How has what I learned there and the support that I got there, how's that benefited me in my life so far? And if you do that for 2 or 3, not for 27, just 2 or 3, what you're doing is you're actually building a neural pathway. You're reminding yourself, you know what, we've been here before. We've struggled before. We've had hard times before. I felt this negative emotion before. And this is the benefit or the blessing or the learning or the insight or the awareness that has actually gotten me all the other good things that I've had in my life to a certain extent, and bad, doesn't matter. That's how it's got me here. So what that does is like, well, okay, so I could do it before. So you know what? If you've run a marathon before, it's easier to run the next one. It's difficult to run a marathon the first time. But let's not choose a marathon. If you've run 5Ks and before with ease, and it's been 20 years and you haven't run 5 kilometers again, but then let's assume you're physically able, you believe that you could do it once before, and yes, now it's 20 years later, but with enough training, you could probably do it again. Same kind of thing. So it helps that kind of, when we go back and we see, so if we take the baby, the child who's now lost its first race that it ran at 6, if that child was able to go back and go, well, you know what, did I give up when I was learning how to walk? Well, no. Okay, well, do I have to give up now? Maybe what this means is I hate running, in which case I'm not running another race, but I'm going to compete in different ways if that's what I want to do. Or it might be, well, you know what? Failure isn't the end of the road. And one race lost doesn't mean that I have to stop doing this thing that I love. So it's very useful to go back and to just say, where and when was I in a similar situation? And what did I learn? What were the insights? What were the blessings? Where was the support? Because it had to have been there. And that then gives you courage that even if you can't see it now, you don't know where the support is, you can't see how the blessings are going to be, you don't know if you're going to get through this alive. It's just like, well, you know what? Actually, I got through some of that other stuff. So I have some skills, and maybe I need some help, but I can do that too. So that's useful. I found that useful. You on mute, Antoinette. You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I have found it useful to know I've got through tough things before, but in my case with cancer, but just an add-on is that I knew I had to start doing things differently to what I'd done them before. So I had run marathons, I'd built a big business, I had created a lot of, I'd educated myself a lot, and all of those things were hard. So I knew I could do hard, but I needed to change the way I did things, in other ways. Like I had to ask for help, which I'd never asked for help with anything before. So I think this leads to what I had next on my list is move from resistance to curiosity. So if you start becoming curious, it opens space. So, and that can take time. I mean, I didn't get all this in the first week I had cancer. It took me ages. I just had to keep on asking a higher power or my higher self, why has this happened to me and what do I need to learn from it? Not to judge myself. And the answers started unfolding over time. But I guess I had that curiosity and the knowledge that I could grow from this, even if I didn't cure myself of it. But I ended up, I'm still alive. So I think if we can also name what's happening to us, if we can, it's quite useful. Are you feeling grief? Are you feeling lost? And sometimes I find if I name a feeling, or a mental state of mind, often underneath it, there's another one and another one, but that's something we can talk about another day. And Loretta will love this one, and I often do this still located in your body. Breathe into your body. You know, the body never lies. The body holds all of this. That's why we do this podcast. Where do you feel this in your body? You'd be surprised what your body will come up with and what it will tell you. And then ask questions of it. And Loretta said earlier on, see it as something separate. And I found that quite helpful. There's parts of ourselves. We all have different parts. We all have voices in our head. And sometimes they seem to contradict each other. Some of them are pretty cool in my head. And I've learned now to engage with it, actually, sometimes to see it separate from me and ask it, what do you want from me? What's actually happening here? I kind of develop a little relationship with it, because the one thing is our natural tendency is to fight with these different parts of ourselves, I think. And that's when the self-judgment becomes a problem, and then everything spirals from that. And create a holding ritual if you can, whatever works for you, but make a decision as a starting point. And then, I don't know, have a journal or light a candle or sit quietly with music, or give your suffering a container. Okay, give it a sacred space where it's allowed so that it can be held rather than it holding you hostage. And yeah, see it separate from yourself. We've just spoken about that. And Robert Falconer had a tool which has worked well for me recently. He said, engage with it, talk to it, see it as a separate entity. If it's the mental stuff, which it often is, that drives all the rest of the stuff, he said, surround it with light and send it back to the light. And I thought, oh, yeah, I really, at the time I heard that, I thought it was quite lame. But let me tell you, I've tried it recently, because this voice in my head can still sometimes be very loud and it's nasty. And that tool sometimes works very fast and immediately for me, separating yourself from that voice. But different things work at different times. But it takes time and discernment and deep intuition to know what you have to do at what time. But you just need to start somewhere.
Sorry, I just want to just interrupt for, it's just going to be quick. Remember that our subconscious responds to pictures and emotion, not to words. So when you do that, so when you think about, oh, these imagination tools are lame, because, you know, I also tend to like have a little eye roll at them, because, you know, if it's not complicated, it's one of my strategies. If it's not complicated, it can't possibly work. So using your imagination, again, imagining it like your GPS, or imagining it like Siri that you can ask questions of, or imagining it as separate to you and telling it that, you know, you're surrounding it with light and you're moving it into the light. That may seem like it's just your imagination. Okay, well, here's a golden nugget. Your imagination is actually what helps you access your subconscious. And that's where this stuff is sitting that's making you so terrified. So it doesn't mean that it takes away your unconscious or your subconscious fear, but it means that in the moment, your subconscious goes, oh, okay, we've sent it to the light. And your nervous system responds to that by going, oh, for now, the threat has been averted. So
Yeah, and I think it also, oh, sorry, I keep on interrupting you today. I also read in a book only this weekend, and I loved it, and I think it fits in well here. She said the path of the ego is a very wide and rocky one, and the path of higher self or spiritual self, God self, is a narrow one. But it's the one that gets us there. And she said, all you actually have to do is cross the line. And that's like such a simple statement, and it can seem so bypassy, but actually it's another one of those things when my mind, I think it talks a lot to separating ourselves from it. When my mind starts with this habitual, you're not enough, and the anxiety that comes with it, I go, no, I've crossed that line. I've crossed the line. So it's like maybe what you're saying is you're telling your brain, because the brain believes what you say. Am I right? That's what you've just said. No, I've crossed that line. I'm not on that long, hard, stony path anymore. I'm going to keep on going back onto it. But I've crossed the line. I'm on the narrow path now. So, and what's really worked for me, this is a tool I've thrown in, which you actually mentioned to me ages ago, and it really works for me, especially when I don't just ask myself, I ask my higher self and I ask God or the supreme highest power, whatever you call that quantum energy. What is my next step? Just show me my next step, because sometimes it gets overwhelming. Sometimes it gets hard. Sometimes I feel like I'm doing things that I'm in treacle and I can't move forward. And then I'm like, Loretta said to me once, just ask what the next step is. So when it gets tough for me now, sometimes just wake up in the morning and I go, what do you want me to do today? What is my next best step here? And it has been astounding what has unfolded from that. But you must know it may not be what you think it's going to be or what you necessarily have decided to do. And then the last thing I picked up in some research I did, but I know that this is highly important. Let others witness you. We tend to suffer in isolation. I certainly did. Speak to somebody who can hold that space for you without fixing you. And that's the value of working with a coach. Strengthen your support system. So if you can't afford a coach or you don't have a coach, I'm sure we've all got one friend, one or two friends, or a person that can hold a safe space for our pain. Connection reminds us we're not in this alone. We're all human. We all tend to think we're the only one that's freaking out or riddled with anxiety. And we're all going out there being okay, to each other. And you know me, I'm very expressive about my suffering. Loretta's been at the other end of a lot of it. Thank you, because I journal verbally. But I found that with people, it sometimes opened the way for people to say to me, oh, yes. Oh, me too. It's so rough. We don't have to hide it. But we do need a safe and unjudgmental space. So it's another one of those two-sided coins. And this is something I'm throwing in because it's what's worked for me. And Carolyn Mace talks about it too. So it may or may not be for you, but faith and prayer have been one of the ultimate shifting tools for me when I'm in a very difficult space. And I'm going to quote Carolyn Mace because she said it better than I could. To feel the suffering and to know the pain of the unnecessariness of it. That's where this journey starts getting hard, when you know intellectually and you realize you don't have to suffer so much, but this unconscious stuff is still coming up and it can create so much drama in your head and your emotions, and it tends to do that more the more we heal. So sometimes she said, I feel so tight in its grip that the only way through it for me is serious prayer. She said, I can't get through it any other way. I've got to believe that this prayer is somehow making a difference, even if I can't see or feel the difference. Because in some way, that helps me to sleep at night. She said, my only other alternative is to become angry, and I can't go in that direction. So that is something that, I think ultimately this becomes a journey of sacred training. And I think it's very hard for those of us who have deep unconscious wounding and stuff to have deep trust and faith in anything, even God. I would intellectualize about God and my faith, but boy, have I been brought down to the wire to realize that how deep is my true faith? So when I'm really, really having it tough recently, like earlier this year when I nearly physically died, the only go-to for me was prayer. The only. And I survived the night and I've come through and out the other side amazing. So there were lots of other factors that played a role, but it was grace. And if I hadn't done that prayer, I don't know what would have happened. I might have still got through it, but it has its place. So, yeah. Loretta, I don't know if you want to add anything more.
One last thing I'm going to say on the prayer thing, and is that So for people who can't relate to the praying, it's not that I can't relate to it. It's just that if that doesn't resonate for you, I see praying as a form of surrender. It's like you're saying, God, I can't do this here, but you're actually facing the truth. You're facing the truth of where you are. You're facing the truth that you're terrified. You're facing the reality that you actually don't know. You are actually being so real and so vulnerable in the prayer. I think that that's part of the healing, quite
That is
frankly. So
astounding.
for those of you who don't necessarily believe in God, right, and you go, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not praying. Just imagine that you were telling someone incredibly wise the truth of where you are right now, your level of desperation, because that is, again, you are surrendering to the truth. And the truth is what sets you free. The
So
truth of
true.
how vulnerable you are, the truth of how terrified you are, the truth of how clueless you are on how to fix this. So when we get to that point, when all we can do is pray, I would say that that's when we get to the ultimate truth of where we are right now.
Yeah, and deep surrender. And in fact, Loretta, no matter
Absolutely.
what your spiritual belief is or isn't, every single one of us, and we talked about this in early episodes, has a lower self and a higher self, or an ego self and a
A divine
um,
nature, or yeah,
yeah,
whatever.
I mean, you can call it anything you want, but we are connected energetically to that quantum soup. Call it what you want, the universe, whatever, source. And in that space, we are all powerful and all knowing, and that's where our creativity comes from. But it's so hard for us to deeply access that because it requires deep surrender, and not just surrender out there on memes. It requires surrendering to taking a guidance that might seem counterintuitive or counterlogical. It takes surrender to how broken you really are and how desperate you are. And to letting go of the ego's deep desire to control everything and fix everything. And I'm one of those people. I've fixed many things in my life. I've got out of plane crashes. I have healed myself of cancer. I've run marathons. I've run businesses. And one of the biggest journeys I've been on recently is not to look back on that and say, oh, look how strong I am. I can do all of this. But was to say, yes, I can. I do have the resilience. I do have the courage. I do have all of that in me. I've got through tough. But right now, my lesson or my point of growth is I surrender. I cannot do this myself. Oh, I have goosebumps when I say that.
And I think that in the surrender, because until you surrender, you're fighting. And when you're fighting, your sympathetic nervous system is dominant. So you're not able to rest. You're not able to restore. It's impossible to heal when you're in sympathetic dominance, when you're in survival, fight or flight. When you get to, I'm at my lowest ebb and I give up, like, God, I'm giving it to you now, your sympathetic nervous system goes. So just from a physiological point of view, something shifts. So
Wow,
these things are
amazing.
all connected. There
Yeah.
isn't like it's only your energy, or it's only your limiting belief, or it's all of it. It's all of it. And I
Yeah.
truly, and I am going to end with this for me, is that I believe that our purpose on this earth is to align with our true divine nature and purpose,
Yes.
whatever you want
Yes.
to call that. And
Yes.
you cannot do that from a place where you think you are in control of all of it. And that's one of the reasons why suffering is the wound that lets the light in, and all of those sayings
Yes.
by the wise mystics. And so when we can go, okay, not loving this, this sucks, don't want this, have no idea how to do this, but have to accept that it is me right now. I have a friend who had a really, like a hugely traumatic medical thing, and he was praying and he was like, God, why me? And he says the answer he got was, well, why not you?
True.
I was like, absolutely. I mean, who do we think we are that we should be exempt from suffering. I mean, who do we think? And he said, why not you? And that was my friend's turning point. When he was like, well, okay, I'm going to stop fighting against why me. It's like, well, why not me? Well, because it actually is me and it is happening to me. And how can I work my way into being more in alignment with my true nature and purpose?
Yeah, and Richard Rohr says, and now, I mean, I'm coming across people all the time saying this, but he was the first guy that brought me to the mystical spiritual path, is that for human beings, it's the state of the shipwrecked, was the word he used. Unfortunately, it's the state of the human condition. Maybe we'll know when we leave our bodies why it's that way, but it's through hardship, it's through brokenness, it's through so-called suffering that we either break open to this journey or it takes us out. And a lot of those mystical spiritual teachers are saying now that the reason the world's in such an extreme mess and there's so much darkness is because this collective shadow has been suppressed for so long. We have been pushing aside evil and darkness and looking for the light and the zen. And so it doesn't matter how much green juice you do or meditation, the darkness is real and it sits within us and it's part of our shadow side. And looking at that is one of the hardest things I've had to do on this journey. But as soon as we can do that within ourselves, to see the dark side of ourselves, the shadow, our near enemies, the way we operate in the world, that's so sneaky. And it might look like good because we're successful or we're kind. That's the hard part of this journey, but that's where the true transformation lies for us as individuals and for our collective, because we can't keep on pretending that every human being doesn't have a shadow. And we can't keep on pretending that there isn't a global dark night of the soul or that this shadow is now arising in all its horrific glory. Sure, I didn't mean to say that, but anyway, Loretta's nodding. So.
No, I agree. I agree with you. And I just want to say that your shadow is not necessarily evil. It's the parts that you think of. So like for me, weakness is one of my shadow traits. Now, I don't think that weak is necessarily evil, but I judge it as bad. So your shadow is whatever you are judging as being negative about you. All right. So yeah, and it's the suppression of what we suppress gets expressed somewhere else. So sometimes it gets expressed in our bodies because we get sick. It gets expressed in our relationships. It has to be expressed. And so and I don't mean we're going to go out there and just like let it all out. I'm just saying expressed as in has to be acknowledged and seen. It's just a part of us that wants to be seen and integrated. Anyway.
Yeah, what did Jung say? Anything that remains unconscious is going to run our show, and we're going to call it fate, unknowingly run our show. So please go back to our episode on the unconscious. It was episode 3, I think, and on limiting beliefs, because it all ties in with this. And maybe to just end off to say that working with somebody who can take you through this journey is very helpful. So, I always advocate Loretta, but there are other people we can refer you to, and we are busy setting up a community space where we can connect with anybody who wants to be part of what we are calling the Inner Healing Hub, where we can bring deeper insights on that platform, more tools, more in-depth diving into these things, some beautiful master classes and connection groups. So watch out for that. And we are going to invite a certain number of people in at no cost in the beginning to pilot project it. So if you'd like to be one of those people, please drop us an email. So you can be first on the list. We're very excited about that. Thank you, Loretta, for another profound conversation. And thank you for whoever showed up for this. May the force be with you. Bye.